If you review the materials that were shared earlier, we had indicated that people should come to the session with A4 sheets. So if you have them, you may want to pull them out, and then we will do this together. So the what table is basically, we can use any other piece of paper, but we practically use A4 sheets because they are very handy. And what we do is to divide the, so you use it's in the landscape format, landscape. And then you will divide it into 4 almost equal parts. Since you're using a rough hand sketch, it may not be very equal, but so you try to have a divided into 2 parts first, and then you divide the 2 parts into another 2 parts. So we have 4 columns in all. Now in the first column, we will write the text for the first column is what I know. So this is something that as facilitator, you will guide your learners to do before the start of a session. So it could be a new topic that you are introducing, or a session that takes the learning to a different topic, or another session, a different session of the same topic. So basically the first column would write what I know. So what the learner knows about the topic or the session. Then in the second column, you would write what I want to know. So you're basically guiding the learner to explore their own imagination about the topic. So what I know, and then what I want to know. The third column, even though, so you would complete the first 2 columns at the start of the session, and then the last 2 columns will be completed at the end of the session. So but we will still put the title, I mean the headings for the columns there. So the third column, you would write there what I learned, or what I learned, depending on which of the English you're using, British or American. What I learned. And then the fourth column is how I'm going to apply this knowledge. How I'm going to apply this knowledge. So to go over them again, we have what I know, what I want to know, what I learned, and how I'm going to apply this knowledge. So to help us just try them, we're going to try to complete these as learners for the first 2 columns. We have the next 2 minutes to try to put something down for the first 2 columns before Siziwe will step in. And basically this tool, the what table, it's part of evaluation. You can use it as part of evaluation, but the formative evaluation, so that the learner, this one is a resource the learner will keep for themselves. So you help them to track their learning process, help them to imagine what they want to learn, start thinking right from the course about just after the session about what they have learned. So it helps them kind of develop a journal even to track their learning, and then even imagine how they are going to use the knowledge or skills in their work that they will be doing. So thank you for undertaking that exercise. Siziwe will continue.
Thank you very much, Kirchuffs, and thank you, everyone. Just to say that I will switch off my video. I don't have electricity at the moment. It just went off. So I'll switch off my video as I present. So I just thought, let me just put my face out there so I do know who's talking. So apologies for that. Can you see my slides? Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this opportunity to really come and share in this platform. My name is Siziwe Ngcwabe. I am the operations lead for Africa Evidence Network. The network is based within the Center for Evidence at the University of Johannesburg. And the network has been working together with PAX Africa for a number of years. So there's many projects that we've worked together on. And this is one of those projects that we've really sort of, collaborated on and worked together. Today, we're just sharing with you, how we've decolonized pedagogies, and then lessons from the two organizations on how we've worked on that. We'll give examples of how we've done some of the work. So some of the principles that we've used was conceptualizing pedagogy and ensure that we are clear in terms of the concept that we want to use in terms of the work that we are doing together as partner organization. And also we are deliberate in terms of how we design the work that we do together to make sure that, it is member-centered or learner-centered, to make sure that it's really beneficial to the learners. And also the stage of implementing, and also that's one area where we ensure that we work together, we implement together, because most of the things that we do, we ensure that we really collaborate in how we do the work that we do. And lastly, we ensure that we monitor and evaluate the pedagogy, because it's really important to us to be able to take that opportunity and reflect on the work that we have done and what are the things that are working, what is not working, to ensure that we constantly improve the work that we are doing. And then in terms of when we conceptualize the pedagogies, I think these are three of the important things that we really look at. The learning is self-directed and is continuous. And most importantly, we want to make sure that we improve productivity. And then also pedagogy aimed at active learners, not a passive audience, because we ensure that our learners are active, our members are active participants in the work that is done together. And also we looking at co-development of learning priorities through a needs assessment. So we do a needs assessment to ensure that the learning priorities have been developed, co-created or co-designed together with the learners, so that everyone buys into the learning priorities that are going to be undertaken for that particular process. And then in terms of when we design pedagogies, we review the design elements with our learners or our members in the context of the Africa Evidence Network, which is the AEN. So including the setting their own learning objectives, because it's mostly about them to make sure that they really are involved, they're active participant in how this is designed and is beneficial to them. And also we ensure that there's responsive capacity development activities, which is really different from teaching and capacity building. So it's responsive in nature to ensure that it responds to the needs at that particular moment, and also the learning objectives that have been designed together with the learners. When we're implementing pedagogies, I think it has been said in most of the sessions also yesterday around the role that is undertaken is of a facilitator, also opposed to a teaching role. And the approach is also learner-centered and the activities are learner-centered. And in between what we do, we use energizers, icebreakers to ensure that, it's exciting to the learners, it keeps them involved and engaged in what we are doing with them during the sessions. And also is modulated learning sessions, just to ensure that it's taken in small chunks so that they follow the process according to the agreement that we've done when we're discussing all the learning activities and how we want this undertaken. And in relation to monitoring and evaluation of pedagogy, both formative and summative assessments are conducted. And I think most importantly as well, we do follow-up learning sessions, because it's important for us to keep in touch with the learners. I think when Charity and Aziza were sharing yesterday, you've seen that there was follow-up with the learners, there was that keeping in touch with them to always build that relationship and foster those continuous collaborations. and then conduct impact assessments. And also lastly is the learner-driven communication through lived experiences. So we ensure that we incorporate all of this in how we design the work that we do. And I think just to, with that, let me share with you one of the work that we have done together with PECS Africa. Africa Evidence Network is a community, it's a Pan-African community of more than 3,500 members from across 46 countries and beyond. So those individuals are really interested in the production and use of evidence in evidence-informed decision-making. So we are that platform where we are ensuring that we work together because we have the largest body of information on individuals and organizations supporting evidence in the continent. So it is easier for us to bring people together to work together and be member-focused and member-driven in us increasing use of evidence in informed decision-making in the continent. And I think also with PECS being the youth think tank, they are helping government agencies to improve their use of research, data, and other types of evidence in policymaking. So you can see the synergies in terms of the work that we do as the network and as PECS. And I think our members kept on asking for support in capacity development. This made us, as the AEN, explore different ways to engage and conceptualize things together, particularly during the COVID time. So this made us rethink how we do our biannual conference in 2020. So that event, Evidence 2020 Online, was redesigned to be a working event where we had one of the work streams, we were sharing capacities. What we did there, we established working groups before, during, and after the event. So that working group worked together before the conference and during the conference. And out of that event, they produced a manifesto. That manifesto was an output of the Evidence 2020 from that group of working groups. So this was published in English and in French, I think early this year. And the French version, one of our members volunteered to translate it into French to ensure that our members that are French speaking are not left behind in these conversations around this manifesto. Just to share with you that this manifesto is a declaration by all Africa's evidence ecosystem about the kind of capacity development we practice. And also it is Africa-led in approach to enhancing capacities in evidence-informed decision-making in the continent. And also it serves as a resource and inspiration to the evidence ecosystem in the continent. And also it challenges mainstream views on capacity building for EADM in Africa. So this work, this manifesto was done before the event and then was fine-tuned during the event. Then after the event, we had working sessions where we wanted to fill some gaps because in the conference we had 2 days to work on this. So after that, we had brainstorming sessions just to make sure that we put flesh in areas that we didn't have an opportunity to ensure that they are beefed up and they are covered within the manifesto. And after that process, in September last year, we launched a webinar series that also continues conversations between the working group members, AEN members, and people within the ecosystem in the continent. So these webinars are just ensuring that we continue to share our experiences, we continue to enhance those connections amongst ourselves. So it really has been a great journey. And from those webinars, we're also developing an open access database of organizations involved in capacity development in EADM in Africa. So people know who's doing what, where and how. Who do you collaborate with? Who do you, foster relationships with in the continent, within the capacity development space? And also that has also worked towards us establishing a community of practice for the people that we've been working with throughout this entire process. And Charity is now the coordinator for the community of practice. And also what is interesting about this work, we continuously reflect on what works and what does not work. and consult our members on an ongoing process as we do this work together. So I think also, just to say, PACS and the AEN have applied decolonized pedagogies in many contexts in Africa. For example, in Ghana, Ethiopia, Nigeria, and South Africa. So we continued to implement these to ensure that we are always contributing in one way or the other. And also we believe that only together, evidence-informed decision-making can be a reality. So it's important for us to always work together and feed on each other and learn from what each and every partner is doing across the continent. And I think from those few words, also we have this quote that we've put here: until lions tell their tale, the story of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. So I hope us sharing how this manifesto was designed and went through all those different principles that we've shared in this presentation is really helpful and is beneficial to you as well to learn from what we've done in the past year. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Siziwe, for the information. I hope that you learned a thing or two about the great work that we are busy with. So we'll move on to the next session. So we're gonna do some brainstorming. I've put in the chat the link to the Jamboard. Have you seen it all? If you can go to the Jamboard. Has everyone seen the link to the Jamboard? Oh, okay, yeah. So you see that, all right, so that's fine. So from what Siziwe has presented, there's a number of principles that we have identified. So on the Jamboard, you'll see that we would like to brainstorm and share our lived experiences with respect to applying the foundational principles for decolonizing pedagogy. So these principles, if you can see, okay, they're on the different boards, but there is conceptualizing pedagogy, then designing pedagogy, implementing pedagogy, and monitoring and evaluation pedagogy. And this is through your lived experiences. So if you can see here, we provided some examples. So for the first one, with respect to conceptualizing pedagogy, you can put in your ideas here about how you conceptualize pedagogy in your line of work or from your experience. Then you see that the next one is about designing pedagogy. Then implementing, how have you implemented the different pedagogies? And then the last one is on monitoring and evaluation and evaluating pedagogy. So I'm not sure if there are any questions before we go to our breakout rooms. Okay, so Ellie, are you gonna help us with the breakout rooms?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that's fine. Thank you. So just looking forward to all your ideas and your lived experiences on the different pedagogies.
So I will take over at this point from Charity. And we noticed that many people have added to the different slides, which is great. So what we will do at this point is to invite individuals randomly to speak to some of the things that they added, some of the sticky notes that you added to each of the clusters of the principles that we shared, and then we can reflect on those. Is that okay? Anybody want to start for us?
Kirchuffs, I can begin with a reflection. I found this really challenging to do as I was looking at the Jamboard, because I wasn't sure always for me and my own process, what is conceptualizing, what is designing, what is implementing. Maybe I don't think I'm so methodical in my mind about that. And so it was very challenging for me to think about an organic offering and to kind of break it down. It's a good exercise for me to have to think like that, but it stretched me. So thanks for that. And it's making, in our group, we talked a little bit about when is it very useful to have categories like this to help to take our thinking through a process. And when should we be more flexible and not think about things in categories? So that's one reflection from me, please.
Yeah, that's very useful. And it's actually one of the things that we hoped to do to make people reflect through some of these things that we do randomly, but we are not really particular about where, at what stage of the pedagogies development we're doing some of them. So we deliberately broke this whole process into these 4 categories, differentiating, for instance, between the conceptualization stage, where over at that stage we're looking at what is the subject matter we're talking about, or we're going to be learning, or in the other sense, we're going to be teaching our students, okay? But in this sense, we're not teaching, we are only facilitating, all right? So the subject matter area, the content, and all that in its generic sense. And then who is to be in this session in terms of identification of your learners, what competencies should they even have, you know, to start with, and all that. They're part of the conceptualization stage, and you drawing the generic boundaries for the program, all right? And then the next stage of the design is where now you begin to go a bit more into detail, still at the planning stage, but deciding how you're going to do what. For instance, how are you going to facilitate learning? What are the techniques that you're going to be using? Are you going to be using videos? Are you going to be using scenarios, vignettes? Are you going to be doing role playing? What are the different things? And we emphasize a lot on decentering. I think someone put it in there, decentering the learning process from the facilitator. So yours is to give the broad areas, okay? And then help using the different activities to help learners to engage with the content. So typically in the teaching sense, people as facilitators or as teachers would go to the session with PowerPoint presentations, okay? And then we want to teach them what they are to know. But in our approach that we use, if we're to use even PowerPoint PowerPoint slides, they are not containing content, but they contain rather instructions on what is to be done in that session. Do we get the difference? Yeah, so those are the kind of things that happen at the design stage, what you are going to do in specific terms to achieve each of those. Yeah, I see, John, your hand is up.
Oh, yeah, one thing we talked about or asked this question is how to balance emergent and co-created learning and sometimes rather stringent institutional requirements and expectations. So a thing that other people have pointed to, I think, already in our conversations. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So just to continue with the implementation stages, where now you are in the session, and so you want to look out for how best. So the design, so there's what we call the design and reality gap analysis. All right. So at the design, you may have imagined certain things, okay, which is why you chose particular approaches that you were going to use. But at the implementation stage, when you are in the session with the learners, certain things might come up that you might, so this is where the flexibility comes in as well. So at the conceptualization and design stage, you made certain assumptions which helped you to draw your boundaries and then selected your activities. But in implementation, certain things might come up that you need to accommodate. So these are some of the things that we want you to come up with, some of which you've done beautifully on the slide. So I think at the end of this, Ellie, you may want to share some of we would work around them, reorganize them, and then we can share back with everybody so that it serves as a little tools or techniques that for us from this session. And then at the monitoring evaluation stage, typically universities will be interested in the academics in terms of the tests, the quizzes, the exams, and all of those, right? Those are good in themselves. We describe them as the summative assessments, which are good to differentiate the learning competencies and all that. But we emphasize a lot also on the summative assessments, on the formative assessments, which is what the kind of assessments that learners do on their own. So reflections, for instance, has been spoken about a lot in other sessions before this. So they are one of those. The what table that we did just before this is another one to help learners to think through what they are learning and to point some of these down so that later they can go back to them and reflect. So typically we don't, in some universities, for instance, they might, the lecturer might emphasize a lot more on notes, lecture notes, and the lecturer giving the learners notes. But in this case, the lecturer doesn't give them notes, but help them come up with their own notes. Some may not be very detailed, but with the different activities, for instance, vignettes, and then case studies that you may give them to reflect on, they can make some notes out of. So the reflections that they will be having in the course of the learning, they can take notes of some of the things that they are discovering in the session. Yes, Ron.
Hi, thanks. I just wanted to highlight a question in the chat from Bill. How do you build trust, especially among those who might be resistant to the entire exercise?
Yes, this is very important. For instance, yesterday, a question came on how some learners or students come into this in the sessions expecting, that kind of expert knowledge coming from the teacher, all right? But right from the beginning, maybe I should share this experience I had in Nigeria, where in a session in Nigeria, so there's a cultural thing, okay? In Nigeria, there is lots of emphasis on academic credentials, okay? So in that session, there were professor this, doctor this, and doctor that. And at the time, I didn't even have an MSc, okay? Not even a master's. And I was to facilitate learning in that session. So just by the introduction, seems just at the very beginning, there was some kind of the morals going down because I introduced myself without any title and they had all the titles. So just at that moment, I had to address that issue because it was obvious from the demeanor. So I spoke to them that I acknowledge what they are feeling, okay? And that's, it's what I know they have so much knowledge that they are coming to the session with. So what I am going to do is not to add knowledge to them, but to help them bring out these pieces of knowledge they have and navigate it to the direction that we want them to arrive at the end. So I am not going to give them any new knowledge, but to help them discover from their existing knowledge. So I help them cool down the anxiety, and then we went ahead with the session. So trust is very important, and as a facilitator, you should be sensitive enough to identify the conditions in the session, and where you notice that conditions are not very favorable, immediately you will need to address them. By the time we were done with this particular session I'm talking about in Nigeria, there was lots of applause amongst the amongst the learners for the amount of learning that had happened. And that is something that I couldn't have achieved if I went there as their teacher. Certainly, I don't think I would have been the one teaching them, but to help them discover and uncover some knowledge from what they already have. Any other question on the approach? All right, so at the moment, since we have a few more minutes, we want to do some reflection then using our what table that we had started with. So let's pick back our sheets. Let's pick back our sheets. And then we will complete the last two columns that we had. All right, so maybe a couple of people would want to share their learning that they achieved with all of us, and then we can call the session to a close. Maybe Ellie would bring us some music after those. Yes, anyone want to share some learnings that you've taken note of from the session?
I can share one. It's kind of a strange one, but for me, it's helpful to think that the time it takes to design pedagogy carefully is part of my overall commitment to justice and equity. And I don't always think of it that way. I often think of pedagogy as like, you know, something I just have to get done, but it's, you know, I mean, I'm committed to it. I love it, but it also always feels like all the other pressures push it down the priority list. And I think framing it the way we framed it today helps me justify putting it higher on my priority list, if that makes sense.
That is very, very important. So very often we have, I mean, as individual facilitators or teachers, we, in some courses, in my undergraduate days, for instance, I observed many lecturers were not even revising their notes, okay? Just like you mentioned, emphasis is placed on so many other things, but on your own pedagogy, the content, the approach and all that. And the same things were repeated over and over. But yeah, it's something that we need to do consciously, give enough time. So typically 2 weeks even before the session, we normally would do, okay, so this is what we do for short-term workshops, for instance. So in 2 weeks before the session, we send out some needs assessments, okay, that the learners might want to complete in terms of the content that they expect, you know, they are learning, their preferred learning approaches, you know, so it gives you as facilitator a sense of who your learners are, all right? Sometimes if you want to make this a little more, I mean, intense, you may want to request for, if they are professionals, okay, you may want to request for their scheme of service or their terms of reference, okay? Because before the session, you can't assume you know so much about them, but some of these things give you ideas on the kind of things that they do and how you can connect your what you're going to do with them to what they already do and what they already know. So it helps you to review and revise your content and even approach and techniques. You may want to introduce field works like colleagues have mentioned earlier. You may want to introduce guest speakers, for instance, video sessions. There are so many things that you can do to get them engaged in the session. Yeah.
There's also an additional question from Carolyn in the chat. Carolyn, maybe you want to, can you maybe vocalize it? That might be easier than me reading it.
Sure.
Yeah, Kirchuffs and everybody here, thank you so much. This has been really cool to learn and think about. But I'm curious, I mean, I saw on the AAN website, but I'm curious about, you know, what's the approach behind the approach of like figuring out the pedagogical practices. So like, what's the approach of creating the body of users that are going to be participating in creating, implementing, using the pedagogy? So what's, yeah, I kind of used the wording from your website of the EIDM, but just wondering about how you're assembling that body of people, how you're creating access for that body of people. I'm living in a very small village, and so wondering about, like, you know, the secondary school teacher, how they would find you, access this, be able to be a participant in using your evidence body.
Yeah, so maybe I'll direct that question to Siziwe and Charity to speak a little about the AEN and how it's structured, and then I can come in with the latter part of it and how the learning is designed.
Thank you very much, Kirchuffs. The AEN is a network of individuals that are across the continent. How we work with them, there are 4 different ways on how we work with our members. There's one area that we inform. Within that, we use our newsletter that we publish on a monthly basis, and our members contribute with the news articles that are put together in that newsletter. So they're always involved in what is happening. So inform them by using that mechanism. And then the second mechanism is to connect with them using our different events that we host. It's either the conference, the webinars, Africa Evidence Week. So we connect with them using those different innovative events that we have. And also we encourage our members to host events within their own countries. Particularly Africa Evidence Week is meant for that. Do an event in your country, and then the AEN publicizes that event to make sure that we zoom into different countries where our members come from. And then also we learn from one another. We together do research projects or landscape maps. That's another approach that we're using. And then lastly, we advocate for the work that we do using the Africa Leadership Award, which recognizes champions in the continent that are doing amazing work in the continent. And we spotlight also NGOs and individuals that are doing great work that might not have an opportunity to be spotlighted and to be able to connect with other people in different countries. So I think that has been the approach that we've used as the Africa Evidence Network. Thank you.
Thank you, Siziwe. And just quickly to add to that, so the AEN is basically a network, like Siziwe mentioned, of practitioners. And so practitioners, we're looking at them in 3 broad categories: producers of research and data and other kinds of evidence. And we have the users of these resources, particularly or most importantly, government decision makers, both political and administrative officers. And then in between that, we have what we call the intermediary organizations, who play different roles to facilitate activities between the 2 main groups. So we open invitation to people beyond the continent to be part of the network. And then particularly when your work has some influence, I mean, some impact on the continent. So we learn from each other and see how we can sharpen each other's skills. So the different events, like Siziwe mentioned, are the mechanisms that we use to help each other improve on our competencies, and then we grow together. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to the whole team, Kirchuffs, Charity, and Siziwe. I'm going to start transitioning us into our reflection session.